Hey there, and welcome back to the course. In this video, we are going to set up our UITableViewController, and we are also going to be using a couple of the methods in the UITableView delegate. All right, so let's go ahead and start by going to our viewcontroller.swift, and let's just assign a class to this. Okay, so we don't want to use UIViewController, we want to use UITableViewController. Okay, now I'm going to keep ViewController as the name of it just so we don't mess anything up with our file names and everything like that. You can change it if you want, just be aware that you have to change it in here as well to TableViewController. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are going to just compile our application and see what happens. All right, so it should still all be working, except for now we're just going to see some lines in our application. Okay, and that's going to be from our table view. You see those lines? They're really subtle. You might not be able to see it here on the screen, but you might be able to see it on your own simulator. Okay, so first thing I want to do is make this background color white. I don't want it to be yellow any longer because we don't really need that. Okay, next thing we are going to do is we are going to basically implement a couple of the methods that we need to get some text on the screen in here, right? So we're just going to write a function and we'll call it filePrivateFunc and set up table view. Okay, and this is where all of our code's going to reside, in which we will set up our UI table view. All right, so the first method I want to implement is basically height for row at, so we can modify the height for the row at the index path. Okay, you'll see that there's barely any space, and we can change that by saying height for row at and basically overriding this method called height for row at. All right, so go ahead and get that in there, and then basically I just want to return 40. Now, I'm pretty sure that's going to be a very similar height, but we will talk about that later once we get some actual text on the screen so we can see why we might want to make it bigger. All right, you'll see that it's very similar, but if you change it to like 100, they will be bigger, right? Okay, so next thing we need to do is get some text on the screen. Let's go ahead and type in this method called cell for row at index path. You're just going to want to go ahead and get that in there, and it will auto-populate if you just type in cell for row at and then hit return. Okay, in here we need to grab a cell. We need it by saying let cell is equal to tableview dot dequeue reusable cell with identifier. Now basically this is just going to allow us to get a cell on the screen, so go ahead and hit return on that one with the two kind of items there, and we will just say cell ID for now, and then we're going to say index path, and then we're just going to return cell. Okay, and then we'll say cell.text label, and then we'll say question mark dot text is equal to, and we'll say this is a cell at row, and then we'll put a we'll use string interpolation, and we'll say index path.row. Okay, so this is not going to work immediately because we haven't registered a cell with our table view. Okay, now I'm sure this is going to be very confusing if you're new to Swift development, and that's completely normal, but as you go throughout this series and course, you will become familiar with how this kind of stuff works, and it will become second nature to you. All right, so don't expect to know immediately how these things work, because you won't, but you will after a lot of practice and going through this course. Okay, so next thing we need to do is register the cell so that it will actually appear on the screen, right? So let's go into setup table view, and let's just say register, and then let's see, we'll say table view, my bad, we'll say table view dot register, and then we're just going to have to select one of these, and since we're not using a zip file or a nib file, and we're not using like a header or a footer, we're going to have to choose this top one that says registers a cell class for use in creating new table cells. Go ahead and hit return on that, and then let's just say UITableView cell, and then we'll say .self. So we're basically saying, hey, when we get around to this method, when it automatically runs, we are going to return TableViewCells. And then it also wants a reuse identifier, and that's exactly what we use down here. So we need to put that same reuse identifier in there because there are instances in which you'll have multiple table views that have different identifiers. So this is a way we can kind of tell that this method belongs to this table view, okay? Go ahead and reload your application and you'll see that it probably doesn't work again. And that's because we haven't yet specified how many rows we actually want. Okay, you'll see that there's nothing there. So let's go ahead and override another function. This function is going to be number of items, number of rows. Number of items is UI collection view. Number of rows is table view. Go ahead and type that in, and then you'll see this appear, and it says, tells the data source to return the number of rows in a given section of a table view. Go ahead and hit return, and then let's go ahead and return 5. Go ahead and return, or not return, but recompile your application, and you'll see now that we have 5 cells on the screen, all with text that says this is a cell at row and then the number. Okay, now it crashed, so let's go ahead and check out why it might have crashed. It says unable to dequeue a cell with identifier, okay? Now the reason this is probably happening is because we haven't yet called setup table view. Okay, now this is actually what I was trying to go at before, but I totally forgot to do number of rows, so it didn't crash ever. And then I was like, okay, I'll just leave that out. But it's kind of good that I didn't call this, because now you can see what happens if you're returning a number of rows. You want it to have a number of rows, and you haven't yet actually called this line of code, all right? So let's go ahead and call it by saying setup table view in our view.did_load. And then now if you recompile your application, you're going to see that you have 5 cells on the screen with the same text except for the row number, okay? Now that's all for this video. You now know how to set up a UI table view, specifically a UITableViewController. Let's go ahead and get deeper into this in the next video. See you in just a second.